The Iowa Supreme Court says a 16-year-old 75-year prison sentence is cruel and unusual.
That decision came a year after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled mandatory life sentences without parole are unconstitutional for juvenile criminals. Back in 2010, 16-year-old Denham Null shot and killed a man over a drug deal. Null, who's now 20, pleaded guilty to charges stemming from the death of Kevin Bell in Cedar Rapids. Investigators say Null and two others planned the robbery after a drug deal with Bell's roommate went bad. Null shot Bell twice in the head during the robbery. Bell died the next day. A judge sentenced Null to 50 years for second-degree murder plus 25 years for first-degree robbery. Family members said Bell had abused drugs in the past, but had turned his life around, and they couldn't understand why he was shot.
What makes one human being want to kill another? I guess I will never understand.
That was the courtroom scene during Null's sentencing hearing back in 2011. Afterwards, his attorneys argued the 75-year sentence was both cruel and unusual. They said that gave the teenager no hope of returning to society in a meaningful way. Today, the Iowa Supreme Court agreed and said Null must be resentenced. Now, KCRG TV9's Chris Earle has been looking into the possible ramifications of this ruling and joins us from our newsroom.
Chris, two legal experts weighed in on what the sentencing could mean for other Iowa teens who commit serious crimes.
And Beth, they also gave us much more context. This comes from a case last year, Miller versus Alabama, where the U.S. Supreme Court said a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole is unconstitutional for a juvenile, and it violates the 8th Amendment that prohibits cruel and unusual punishments. Today, the Iowa Supreme Court decided on Denham Null's appeal, agreeing with the Miller ruling. And with this legal move, Null's 75-year sentence will be vacated as his case is sent back to district court for resentencing. Cedar Rapids attorney John Jacobson said this ruling differentiates the sentencing guidelines between juveniles and adults.
Juveniles, because of the historical concepts that are articulated in the Null case, are going to be less culpable, and that there should be, and incarceration should be, an opportunity to rehabilitate somebody, and that by imposing a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole, you have now taken away any concept that a term of incarceration is supposed to rehabilitate anyone.
The court must only in rare cases impose life without parole, because when it's a juvenile, they're different than adults, and careful individual factors should be considered.
The prime question that's also in play: what constitutes a cruel and unusual punishment for length for a juvenile? Is it 50 years, 60 years? Jacobson said, as a defense attorney, he thinks every defendant should be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. From the Cedar Rapids newsroom, Chris Earle, KCRG TV9 News.